Welcome to Behind the Mic with Kirkus Reviews, where we talk about audiobooks and the actors who narrate them. I'm Joe Reed, and contributor Stephen Cummings is with me. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Joe. I hope you're doing well this August.
I am doing well this August. I love summer. I'm in my element.
I love summer. I like the bridge to fall, which is why I do like August is typically very summery, of course, but we're heading into a new season and this is a transition I'm up for. So yeah, I'm having a good time.
Good. And I know you have a really interesting theme this week.
Yeah, so this week, the audiobooks we'll be talking about are all audio-centric to a point. A couple of these, the only way you'll find them is in audiobook format, which I think is always intriguing. It really emphasizes the spirit of the content of these titles. The three audiobooks to be discussed this week are Billy on Billy, an audio memoir written and read by Billy Eichner. Then we have Peeing in an Empty Bottle and Other Glamorous Shenanigans of an almost famous transgender comedian on the road, written and read by Roz Hernandez. And then finally, Voice Aversa, Finding My Voices Behind the Mic, written and read by Billy West.
Okay, so two Billies and a Roz. And
we got a Billy, Roz, Billy, Roz, Billy is how this is going to go.
That sounds good. So let's start with Billy Eichner. And why don't you tell us about Billy on Billy?
Yeah, Billy Eichner discusses his life growing up and what inspires him to create the work he's famous for. This is an audio-only title, so you're only going to find it in audio format. Billy Eichner is, I'm going to guess, best known for his Billy on the Street vignettes, where he approaches people on the street in New York City and asks questions that are humorous, yes, but can take people off guard. Eichner's approach is to fully commit to the question, escalating in intensity while subjects struggle to answer a question. Questions might be something like, name 20 white women, for example. And humor ensues.
Yeah, well, not for me, because I have to admit that Billy on the Street, that style has never appealed to me. I don't enjoy seeing unsuspecting people put on the spot, even when it's meant to be funny. I mean, I didn't like it when Candid Camera did it. I didn't like it when David Letterman did it. And I don't like it when Billy Eichner does it. I don't like seeing people ambushed as they're just trying to live their lives.
Yeah, it terrifies me. It's the kind of thing that I would be completely just devastate me to be approached by Billy Eichner. And I can only imagine that in the shoes of somebody who gets approached by Billy Eichner's team, I'd freeze in the face of an absurd question, even if it's a question I'm sure I could tackle. But I think if you were to ask Billy Eichner, it's all about the comedy, it's comedic timing. And of course, some subjects struggle with this sudden confrontation. I get it. It's the point. While some rise to the occasion. There's a classic bit where Eichner approaches a woman and says, "What's it like being an elitist New York POS?" You can go to the bit and find out what actually gets said there. And her response is, without even taking a breath, "It feels awesome." And so I applaud those types of responses because it tends to take the ownership, like, hey, I'm in charge here. I can handle this. But you're right. I completely hear you. And I'm definitely somebody who's an empath enough to go, I really feel for that person who's on the spot. Eichner confirms in his audiobook that these moments, they're not staged, that a great deal of production work goes into making these moments happen, and you have to get the permission of the subject to be featured. So for whatever it's worth, you got to say yes. So that on the street persona is so indelible, that's the only way I really knew him, that Eichner's performance on this audiobook may be a subtle revelation. This is Eichner's choice, of course. He makes it clear that Billy on the Street is a character. It's not him. He was a pop culture-obsessed kid growing up in Queens during the 1980s and 1990s, consuming the culture. His voice here is not his Billy on the Street persona, but it's not really shocking to hear his voice. It doesn't sound all that different. He's still on stage, just speaking to a slightly different audience, perhaps.
I just want to say, I got to tell you, I felt, that high energy. It was really still shouting. And after an hour, I literally took my ear pods out of my ear.
Mm-hmm.
I put them on my shoulder, and I could hear everything he was saying clearly.
Yeah, he has intensity, and he is a bit of a his voice goes there. So I note it's not the same character, but you could definitely hear this performance and go, I know who that is if you know Billy
They're
on the
kissing
String.
cousins.
Yes, absolutely. They are related. But fair
Yes.
enough, I get it. It's a performance. I don't expect him to get in my face and ask crazy questions, although maybe he would if we met.
Yeah. And even if his performance style isn't for me, I really did appreciate hearing that Billy on the Street is a character rather than simply who he is.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. He has a lot of he really calls out to his parents a lot throughout this audiobook for all the love and support that he received from them. And so he describes this audiobook as something of a love letter to his parents, his late parents. Stories of Eichner's creative development. He goes into his reputation, the threads here that built up to where he is, not just on the street, but also he has done the movie Bros, which was a romantic comedy that he co-wrote and starred in. And one of the nice things about the production behind audiobooks like this one is that it takes the time to go to, say, audio clips where we can actually experience the things that he's describing. So I find that to be really helpful. That kind of anchors the performance that he's talking about in the moment that he's talking about it. And it gives a little bit more pleasure to the comedic bits and the movie clips that he shares here in this production.
Well, why don't we hear a clip from the audiobook? Do you need to set it up?
Not a whole lot to set up here. It's fairly self-explanatory. He's just going to walk us through here a bit about the Billy on the Street show.
This is Billy on Billy, an audio memoir written and read by Billy Eichner.
Billy on the Street is a show I created where I run around the streets of New York with an irrational, maniacal amount of passion and energy, having, shall we say, conversations with fellow New Yorkers, some dry and charming, but some, more famously, often absurdly heated and loud, about the films, television shows, actors, artists, and musicians I love, both celebrating and satirizing our, or at least my own, cultural obsessions. Billy on the Street was always a bit hard to describe. It was many things, sometimes all at once. Above all, it was my take on the classic Man on the Street format, first popularized by Jack Paar on the original Tonight Show and shows like Candid Camera, along with local news broadcasts, and, years later, when I was a child, by one of my earliest TV heroes, talk show icon David Letterman, who, in a still shocking turn of events, became a big Billy on the Street fan himself and ended up being one of my guests on the show.
It is kind of Billy on the Street-ish.
Yes, he starts there.
But, since we're looking at audio first productions today, this one really leans into, I think, the possibilities of the medium, because the clips and other audio elements seem designed to recreate Eichner's career in sound rather than simply narrated.
And he actually notes too early on that this is just the way he has to do this. If he's going to tell this story, it's going to be his voice, his performance. This is just, I got the sense listening to this that there's a choice being made here to emphasize the audio aspect of his persona, which I truly appreciate. And I agree too. I love it when audiobooks, they become this sort of, this is not just the secondary component to something else, some other media. This is the media. And that's what I think is very exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I thought all the production elements felt really essential to the memoir, not something that would be cute to add.
Absolutely.
So now we're moving to Roz Hernandez, Peeing in an Empty Bottle. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, read by Roz Hernandez, a transgender comedian, hitting the road and narrating the journey with clear-eyed humor, strength, and empathy. Her humor is centered on this identity and experiences. Her audiobook subtitle, that really long one, describes her as an almost famous comedian, and that's fair. So in this social media era, you can be really popular, say on Instagram, have lots of followers, but you still have to go out and promote yourself every day to get people to come to your show. And so by the end of this audiobook, I learned a lot, not just about what it means to be transgender in the United States today, but also the essential needs of a working comedian on the road. This is a literal journey. Hernandez is in the car going from town to town on a summer tour of over 50 shows, sometimes finding places to get booked to perform while she's out there en route. She's good with crowd work, bits that she works on and retools. She's traveling solo, by the way, which is an important part to all this. So the title of the book, Peeing in an Empty Bottle, really does capture the resourcefulness that is required to do the work that she's doing.
You know, I've always been fascinated by the idea of setting off alone on a road trip ever since I read Travels with Charlie. I even had a dog named Charlie, spelt the same way. There's something both romantic and daunting about it. And Roz's willingness to crisscross the country by herself while building a career, that made a real impression on me, because that same adventure for a woman, and especially a trans woman, carries risks many of us never need to think about.
Absolutely. And first of all, you mentioned Travels with Charlie. This is a journey. This is a traveling book as much as any of those others that you could put in that particular genre of work. So I just think I love the comparison. She's traveling throughout the South and Midwest here. And early in this story, she talks about how she's making her plans and her friends keep reminding her to be safe. And she notes that this is, of course, important. But she also notes that also is obvious, and she's got work to do. She's out there, she's building her reputation as a comedian. As we go on this journey with her, those interactions with local community members are reminders that people are making their lives everywhere in this country. Hernandez includes clips of her talks with owners of the establishments she books and their experiences with their communities. And this is another key highlight, much like the Billy Eichner book, where you have actual snippets of audio, not just of her performances, but also the people that she's talking to along the way. And it really brings to life even further this already fascinating story. A recurring theme here is how these clubs, these bars, these performance halls are beacons for the trans community, not just a place for entertainment, right? But also as a place of safety.
I agree. It felt at times, and I mean this in the best possible way, as much of an audio documentary as it did a memoir. And I really, really liked the way that she shows what those clubs and those venues actually mean to the people who gather there.
It was quite moving, but and also very insightful. So I do recommend this for a variety of reasons, that being one of them. I also just enjoyed her performance here.
I love it.
Sometimes it's over the top, but she's clearly balancing the humor and the humanity with the reality of being trans in the United States. Truly a difficult time, to say the least. So I found this to be just an incredibly important audiobook, as well as a really entertaining one.
Yeah, I agree. She sounds larger than life, especially when she's on stage, where of course she has to be larger than life. But I thought she was also willing to like quieter, more vulnerable moments, kind of breathe. And for me, that's one of the things that kept the audiobook from being just one long comedy set.
It's true. And honestly, one of the greatest skills that Roz Hernandez demonstrates here is listening. Because even she's performing to us and performing for an audience, she's listening to the people that she's meeting with along the way. And I just thought that is incredibly important and not always highlighted in these kinds of audiobooks.
Completely agree. So let's hear some. Set this up.
Yeah, so here in this clip, we get to hear Hernandez. She's on her tour. She's en route, and she's navigating a stop in Texas. And this is a great example of her approach to the narration and the kind of journey that she's on.
This is Peeing in an Empty Bottle. It's written and read by Roz Hernandez.
The following day, I bopped on over to Tucson. Pretty much all I know about Tucson is that Romy and Michelle were from there, and they hated it. But I had heard from some non-fictional characters that it's actually pretty great. I needed to see for myself. When I arrived at my hotel, I realized that the dress that I had planned to wear that night was wrinkled, and I didn't bring a steamer. Sometimes I like these kind of challenges, but I have to be in the mood. I had an empty spray bottle that I filled with water, and a hairdryer with one of those flathead nozzles at the end. And it did the trick. I felt as if I had just invented Post-its.
Okay, first of all, that is a really smart idea for how to get rid of wrinkles in clothing while you're traveling, and one I am going to use.
Yes, noted.
I love how lively and engaging she is. I mean, there's an exuberance to her that I just enjoyed spending time with her.
Yeah, me too. Every audiobook is a journey, and I just felt like I was in good hands with Roz Hernandez's performance here. She was a great storyteller. She really shared so much, and it was just so meaningful. So yeah, just a really good experience, this one.
And now we move to Voice Versa, Finding My Voices Behind the Mic, and that's written and read by Billy West.
This is our second Billy West. He looks back on his journey to becoming one of the hardest working voice performers around. And I note this right at the top because listeners may not necessarily know the name Billy West, but I'm certain they've heard his voice or his performances. He has decades of experience in voice performance work. So if you don't necessarily recognize all these voices, it's also because he does such a wide range of voices, from children to elderly adults to, other creatures or things that need voices or sounds.
No, I agree. I was somebody who really didn't quite know the name was kind of familiar, and I was amazed by the sheer range of characters Billy West has created.
Yeah.
From Zap Brannigan, who was in Futurama, or Ren and Stimpy, and he was both. I mean, he disappears so completely into each voice.
He does. He did. But yes, you're absolutely right. Futurama, for example, he did the voices for that long-running animated TV show. Keeps coming back. When I was a younger adult, Ren and Stimpy was very popular on TV. I should note that he notes in this audiobook how much he loves working with the Futurama crew. Not so much the Ren and Stimpy crew. He gets into some of those details. But it's also fascinating because he's really work-related to, like, how does one survive and thrive in this world of voiceover work. And it's just a fascinating, it's for me, I just love hearing these stories about how he walks us through how that experience is. He talks at length about his rise into the world of voice acting and the kinds of teams that he enjoys the most. And he's done a lot of commercials too, by the way. This is kind of how I know him, because he did the Cheerios Honeybee. I had no idea. And if you think about bee voices, that's got to be really high pitched, but he's done a bunch of other things. He's been on the Howard Stern show. I have to confess, I didn't live in the market where Howard Stern's show existed, so I never heard those bits before. So those would be unknown to me, but it's another place where people may know the name Billy West.
I found it fascinating that his career wasn't just confined to animation, as you said. I mean, there was the Howard Stern show, the commercial voice work, his life as a musician. And it made me really kind of stop and think about how many corners of popular culture he has been a part of.
I loved that he had such a life where he could have gone in one or other direction. He was on the stage. He was a supporting act or a supporting performance for Aerosmith, for example, early on in his career. He talks about those journeyman musician days. And it seems evident that, things could have gone in a different direction. So fascinating. Again, I say the word fascinating a lot, but I do mean it.
It really was.
It's just one of my go-to words when I'm just sort of, tell me more about your life. West is in his 70s now, just FYI. And in a recent interview, he talked about how he wanted this story out because he's getting older and, he's very blunt again, doesn't know how much time he's got left. The audiobook is a perfect showcase for his history. Some listeners may be a bit surprised, given his just virtuoso voice talent and comedic timing, that in fact his upbringing is nothing like Billy Eichner's. He lived with an abusive alcoholic father, and these passages where he talks about this can be somewhat difficult to listen to. But I think this is part of that lived experience, and it's not uncommon to performers. And I'm grateful that Billy West has the courage to really go into details with this experience, because they really are fairly difficult things that he went through.
Yeah, and I appreciated how candid he was. He never minimizes the abuse, but at the same time, he doesn't wallow in it.
No.
The memoir feels honest and reflective, not self-pitying at all, which made it all the more affecting, I thought.
I agree. So West's audiobook is really the best way to experience this. There is a print version, but the obvious reasons, he's going to give you a guided tour of the many characters that he has brought to life over the years in his career.
Completely, because his voice isn't just the instrument of the memoir, it's the subject of the memoir. And so we want to hear all these characters in his voice, and he just weaves them in as he's telling us his story. And I think your excerpt really illustrates that.
Indeed. So if we're setting this up, this clip that we're about to hear is just enough of an idea of how Billy West got started out, giving listeners a sense of his growing repertoire at an early age.
This is an excerpt from Voice Versa. Finding My Voices Behind the Mic. It's written and read by Billy West.
When I was in school, teachers would say to me, "Everything's a joke to you, isn't it?" If jokes are a survival mechanism, then yes, everything was a joke to me. It's the same to this day. I constantly make jokes about local, national, and world news to keep me from crying or losing my mind or giving up on the world. My music teacher would hear me doing these subharmonic and demonic sounds.
Get out. I said, get out.
I'd be singing like a 3-year-old, and then I'd be making barnyard animal noises. Oh. My impressions of police sirens and space lasers and steamship whistles must have been frightening him.
Yeah, even this short clip, I think, is a good illustration of his extraordinary versatility and also his imagination and kind of guts to play with his voice that way.
Yeah, it isn't just that he has a voice. He knows how to be creative with it. And he's using parts of his body. I'm not able to really speak to all the ways that one uses their voice, but he's able to find those low tones and those high tones just in him, and they just come right out. And he's incredibly creative with all of it. And I imagine he's been creative with it for his entire career. So again, I just love how he's able to just pull these voices out of nowhere and just hit us with these incredibly fully formed characterizations.
Okay, I have a question for you. In this book, West talks about performers like Sid Caesar and Danny Kaye as early inspirations. So did the memoir leave you thinking of him primarily as a gifted impressionist or as an actor who uses his voice or voices as his instrument?
I think impressionism is one thing. He seems to take it just a bit further because he's really able, when you think about the stamp, the indelible stamp he makes or leaves on these different characters, whether it's in the animated shows that he's known for or elsewhere, it's hard to imagine anybody else doing them. So for me, and it could be that that's just the nature of the business and somebody else could do them, but I just think now that I know it's him.
So hard. All of them, I doubt it.
I mean, just knowing now that I know it's him and I know that those voices are there, I would be looking for him in the credits just to know, hey, I know I'm in good hands with this performance because it's Billy West doing it. So I'll leave it at that. I think that the history there with all of the folks he talks about. I mean, he's in his 70s, so he watched TV growing up, Sid Caesar, Danny Kaye. Yeah, those are all influences, but he's definitely one of a kind, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think he really is an actor with an amazing range of voices that live in his brain.
I'd love to take a class from him.
Oh, God, so would I. That would be great. What an interesting week, Stephen.
Great to be here. I loved these titles, what we talked about today. I'm glad I was able to chat with them with you.
Yeah, me too. Three audiobooks by performers, and they lead as audio first books.
Absolutely. So look for the audio titles on these because I really do recommend that be the way that you experience these
Absolutely.
titles.
I agree. Stephen, I'll talk to you next month.
Thank you so much, Joe.
You've been listening to Behind the Mic with Kirkus Reviews. We drop on Thursday, and if you follow us, we will appear in your feed. And then follow Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews. Fully Booked is the podcast for book lovers. Every Tuesday, Megan Labrise brings you author interviews, industry insights, and recommendations from the bestseller list. You can find your next great book on Fully Booked by Kirkus Reviews. You can follow Fully Booked and Behind the Mic on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you get your podcasts. Then stop by kirkusreviews.com to check out reviews for both print and audiobooks. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart, Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, Laura Simeon, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dow is our editor with assistance from Alicia Langerman, and Tom Beer is the executive producer. The music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way, and I'm your host, Joe Reed. Good listening.